Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Kwezi and today I will be sharing my birth story. As you can see, I have a special guest over here. The story is all about him anyways. This is Langelihle and he is 10 weeks old. So today I'm going to be focusing on my labor and delivery. It was a Thursday and I went to see my gynae. I was at that point 38 weeks pregnant, and the gynae said that if I don't go into labor naturally over the weekend, that then on Monday I will be induced. And the weekend came and went. I even moved houses over the weekend, but that was just not enough to get this baby out of me. Hey, it wasn't enough. It was not enough. So Monday came and the doctor had instructed my baby daddy and I to arrive as early as possible on Monday, just in case the induction takes long. That is what they told us. So I assumed that we'd be doing the induction at his offices. So I remember just trying to get dressed in something that's going to be easy to take off, and even bringing along pads and panty liners with me because I didn't know like if I'd have a membrane sweep, if my waters would be broken. I didn't know what to expect. Anyways, we got to the doctor's office, and as early as we got there, there were already people ahead of us. So we just waited like 2 people, and then it was our turn to go in and see him. Then he did an ultrasound. And usually his ultrasounds take super long, you know, he's always measuring stuff. But this ultrasound was super fast. It was a lot faster than usual. And then he asked me to get ready for an internal exam. So my baby daddy had to literally pull off my jeans because I couldn't. And he did an internal exam that was super fast. It wasn't painful at all. And then he said, let's go discuss everything in his consultation room. We sit down and he says, okay, I am going to induce you tonight. And then he tells us that he's going to book us in at the hospital for the procedure. He says that the procedure is going to happen at 4 a.m. but we should just check into the hospital at 8 p.m. Then my gynae also says that my baby daddy should just go ahead and drop me off at the hospital alone. And I was like, no, that's not happening. He needs to be with me at every like step of the way. And the gynae was like, okay, that's fine as well. Then I asked my gynae, will I be allowed to eat during the induction? Will I be allowed to eat whilst I'm in labor? And he said, yes, I can eat. It is just that what usually happens is that the labor is usually so intense that you end up feeling nauseous and you are not able to continue eating. But he said that it's great if I want to eat and keep my energy levels up. And so yeah, that's it. We get told we're having an induction at 4 a.m. and that's that, and we were done with the gynae. Then my baby daddy suggested that we go to the hospital for a tour of the maternity ward. And I should have taken him up on his offer, but unfortunately I said no. I was just not keen. I mean, I was so pregnant and I was so big at 39 weeks. I was actually really miserable that day as well, so I didn't want to go. But that was a huge mistake. The reason why I said no to the tour though is because I wanted to go on a tour when I was 7 months pregnant. And my baby daddy felt that it was too early, and my gynae also didn't want to book me in a hospital yet because he also felt that it was too early. So as a result, now these people are offering me this hospital tour like at the last minute, at a time when I'm like hardly mobile. So it was just not appealing for me, and I said no, I wouldn't like to. So yeah, at that point I did have 80% of my hospital bag packed and ready, but there were still quite a few things left out, like the snacks, and the baby didn't have a bottle yet, and the baby didn't have any formula yet. We felt that we needed to buy formula because all the websites were saying online that you don't have milk for the first 2 days. So I was really concerned that if I didn't have milk, what was the baby going to eat for 2 days? So now we have the whole day to ourselves still. And I decide that I'm going to go and have some hot chocolates at a restaurant whilst my baby daddy goes to look for everything that's still on our shopping list for our hospital bag. And that was kind of fun. I got to just sit down because that's all I wanted to do. And that was nice to just have a final moment to myself. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is my last time at a restaurant all by myself, without a baby. And I was like, probably the next time I go to a restaurant, there's going to be a baby knocking everything over and crying and screaming. So yeah, it was a peaceful, quiet moment. And then we both finished up and made our way home. So once we got home, you know, all the food and everything, we had so many different shopping bags that we needed to sort through. And as I was doing that, I realized that my baby daddy forgot to get me a nursing bra. So we had to go to the mall one more time, and literally the mall was about to close at that point. But we made it to Ackerman's just in time. I was so surprised that they closed so late. And I got one last nursing bra for the hospital. Then at that time, I mean, it was around 7 p.m. So we were already behind schedule, but I wasn't too worried about that. Because with knowing everything starts at 4 a.m., there just wasn't any rush. So we had dinner, and then I decided that I'm going to take a nap before heading to the hospital. So I took a nice long nap, and I'm telling you, that nap was a game changer. I was so miserable the whole day, and taking a nap really just changed the trajectory of my mood. I was in such a good mood once I woke up. I was so happy. All the grumpiness that I had during the day was gone. I was so excited to go to the hospital and meet my baby and just finally get to the end of pregnancy. You know, it was so exciting. Then after that, I went and I had a shower to get ready for the hospital. I had a nice long hot shower, and because I was feeling so good, at the end of my shower, I called my baby daddy into the bedroom, and I was like, you know what, you should get some pregnant nudes. Like, these are the last moments of my pregnancy, and I just really wanted to capture everything. And my baby daddy, he is just the sweetest thing. He got some lights, he got his camera, and he just got me, like, he got the vision that I was looking for the pictures, and he was following all the instructions and getting all the angles, and he was just perfect. And yeah, it was a beautiful, beautiful moment, and I just knew that I wanted to see what I looked like at the end of my pregnancy. And like, in those last minutes, I felt so beautiful, and I was just so grateful to my body, grateful to God that I had such an easy pregnancy, and that it was healthy, and that I had made it to the end. So yeah, I was in a really, really good mood. I got dressed in a cute little outfit, and yeah, I was ready to head to the hospital. So all the bags were in my baby daddy's car. He also had a hospital bag that I had been nagging him to pack. He packed it. I could see he had his towels ready as well. Like, he had a full hospital bag situation going on as well. And yeah, I just knew that we're now going to the hospital. And that drive to the hospital, we don't really live that far away from the hospital, but because it was such a special moment, it felt like time was moving in slow motion. And yeah, I just remember being out on the road, and it was actually raining that night, and the roads were so quiet, and it was like the world had just come to a standstill, you know, and we were there just right at the end of like life before being parents, you know. And I was looking at my baby daddy and I was like, wow, he's my boyfriend, and when we come back from the hospital, he's going to be the father of my child, and everything is going to be different. And I was just taking in those last minutes of the life that I had known for 27 years that was going to change once I have a baby. That's just how I felt about that moment. Like, that drive was big for me and it was so emotional, but I wasn't too emo because my baby daddy was playing some hip hop, and he was also playing some really nice house music. So I wasn't in my head too much. I was able to enjoy the drive, and before I knew it, we got to the hospital. Once we were at the hospital, I just knew, like, from this moment onwards, I should have taken the tour of the hospital, because now we started to get lost and we started to have a few nasty surprises. First of all, the entrance to the hospital was impossible to find. We kept on using different entrances and it was literally like a maze. We figured out, okay, this is the entrance we need to go to, but there were all these different categories for parking, like patients that are here for one day, patients that are here for a long stay, people that are just dropping people off. There were so many different parking lots. And when we finally found the parking lot that we were looking for, it was so far away from the entrance. It was crazy. We get out of the car and literally it is an uphill hike between the parking lot where we were and the entrance that we needed to go to. And that was just so crazy because we had a boot full of bags and there was only two of us. And actually I don't even count at that point because I can't even carry anything other than my ginormous belly. So I just take my suitcase because that's easy. I'm just gonna roll it. And then my baby daddy takes a few bags and he's like, you know what? He's gonna come back once we get settled in. So we take this crazy hike up to the entrance and we finally get there. We get to a waiting room, and there's a receptionist, and we actually sit and we wait for quite a while whilst this guy attends to everyone else that was there before us. And then finally, after like a good 20 minutes, he gets to us and we're like, okay, we're here to check in for an induction to give birth. Oh my gosh, the millions of questions that he had for us after that. We basically needed to fill in so many forms, answer so many questions, and it just took forever. He was calling the maternity ward to confirm that we're coming. At some point, I think he was talking to a walkie-talkie, speaking to the security. So it was just such a tedious process. Like, I didn't even stand up for most of it. Like, as soon as I realized that this is gonna take long, I sat my booty back down and my baby daddy just had to deal with it. Then they called me up and I got a wristband with my age, my name, my surname, the ward I was going to, all of that interesting stuff. Then he directed us to the maternity ward. And I mean, after walking so far away from the parking lot, he actually told us that the maternity ward is actually still quite a walk and we've got to go this way and turn that way. And it was just rough that, like, every step we took towards the maternity ward, I just knew now my baby daddy's got to trek so far back to get everything else in the boot. But anyways, we walked to the maternity ward. The sliding doors open. There are lovely nurses that welcome us into the maternity ward. The first thing they do in the maternity ward is ask to weigh me. So I go and I stand on a scale. Then they show us around. They're like, to our left is the labor ward. Then in the middle, there's a nursery. and then to the right is the rooms where everyone is. And yeah, the nursery was actually empty, which was so crazy. And then yeah, they showed me to my room. So the room was shared. It was supposed to be me, and then there was another bed, but there was like a curtain to separate us. And then there was also a shared bathroom. In terms of space, there was a very, very tiny wardrobe. And then there was just one single plastic chair for your guests to sit on. And like, I was just surprised that like there was hardly any space. And that's when the nurse broke it to us that actually my baby daddy is not allowed to spend the night in hospital at all. And she explained that the maternity ward is considered a female only ward, and that the men that come can only come as guests, which would be during visiting hours, and he's only allowed during visiting hours, or once I'm in active labor, he's allowed to be with me in the labor ward. And so basically he would have to leave me in the hospital alone that night. And that completely broke my heart. I felt so betrayed because I just wanted to be with him, because he was my only support system through this whole process. And then I was being told that I have to be left alone, and I was so worried that the nurses might be rude to me and I won't be able to speak up for myself, or there's something that I'm gonna need and I won't be able to speak up for myself. And that's what I needed my baby daddy there for. So to have to say goodbye to him was really, really difficult. I was in such a good mood earlier. Yeah, that good mood came right to a halt in that moment, and I was on the brink of tears. I was so upset. My baby daddy just told me that I need to be strong, you know, and that it's just temporary that we're being separated, and that he's here and he's only a phone call away. So I didn't have a choice. He went and he got the rest of my 1 million bags, and he managed to squeeze them into this tiny little wardrobe that they had for us. And then he was gone, and it was just me in this hospital room alone. Before I knew it, there was a nurse in the room with me, and she was like, okay, I've got some medical questions to ask you. And she had like a 5-page questionnaire. It was intense. She asked me questions about myself, questions about my baby daddy, questions about my medical history, questions about my baby daddy's medical history, questions about just so many things, details about my pregnancy. And she did tell me that, you know, this questionnaire was meant to just help me feel more comfortable and help take my mind off the fact that I am alone. And you know what, it actually did work. I felt so much more comfortable by the end of the questionnaire. Of course, we did a lot of chatting in between, and yeah, I just felt a lot more at ease by the end of it. So I was grateful for that medical questionnaire. Then after that, she told me to go ahead and get comfortable. She would like to monitor the baby. So she came back with a machine on wheels, and then she put something like a seat belt around my belly to measure the baby's heart rate and everything. And then they monitored the baby for 30 minutes. After monitoring the baby, she lets me know that the baby's doing well. At that point, I think it was around like midnight, 1 o'clock, and she says she's gonna be back at 4 o'clock to start the induction. So she goes off, and then another nurse comes in to put a drip in my left hand. And this nurse just explains to me that even though I don't need a drip at that moment, it's important to just have the connection ready, so that if anything happens, it's easier for them to just put a drip into a connection that already exists. So yeah, she pokes me a few times, And eventually she's able to find a good vein and get me all set up. Then after that, I got a little bit comfortable and I changed into my pajamas, and then I got into the bed and I got some sleep. So 4 a.m. comes around and the nurse comes to wake me up gently. And she's like, okay, it's time for your induction. And she's like, okay, may you please take your pants off? So of course I take my pants off and she puts on some gloves and she puts on some lube and she holds up what looks like a long white piece of tissue, just a long piece of wet tissue. And she's like, okay, I'm going to insert this into you and this is what's going to get everything going. So she tells me, you know, if you need to pee, go pee now so that you don't disturb this induction thingy-mabob. So then I go to the loo and then I come back and she inserts it. I mean, it was not painful at all. And then when she's done inserting it, I just ask her, you know, how far dilated am I? And she's like, okay, well, you're not really dilated, but your cervix is malleable and I am able to stretch it to 1 centimeter. And she was like, that's a good thing. And I was like, oh, okay, that's great. And then she said, yeah, you can go back to sleep and hopefully you will have some contractions because that's what we're looking for. And I was like, okay, that's great. She left and I was just like not convinced that this white wet tissue thing that she inserted in me is gonna get things going. And I just remember texting my big sister and I was like, this does not seem legit. Like, this wet piece of tissue is so underwhelming. I don't even think it's gonna work. I remember telling my sister that. And then I tried to get some sleep and I'm telling you right now, I only got like 30 minutes of sleep. And then before I knew it, I was having cramps. And these cramps just felt like period pains, but they were very uncomfortable. These period pains are just so sore. It's like just cramps in my lower abdomen. And so, you know, with period pains, usually if you can just get into the right position, you can find some relief. So I'm in this bed and I'm just tossing and turning and I'm not able to find a position that will bring relief from the cramps. So I just don't know what I'm going to do. Then I try to switch on my Netflix because Emily in Paris season 4 had just come out. So I was like, maybe if I just watch some of that, I'm gonna forget about the pain. And actually the cramps were so bad, I could not follow the storyline to save my life. I was so uncomfortable and I just kept moving around and it just was not working out for me. At that point, I send a message to my baby daddy and I let him know that I'm starting to have contractions, and I ask him to please bring me a hot water bottle from home because I'm just so convinced that just like period pains, that is gonna make everything better. So time goes by and there's a nurse that comes in and says, hey, she's here to monitor the baby again and see how the baby is doing now that I have started having contractions. So again, she hooks me up to the machine with the seatbelt and she monitors the baby for about 30 minutes. And I'm just, you know, I'm watching this machine and I'm noticing the baby's heart rate's going lower, you know, as I'm uncomfortable. And then she comes around, you know, right before she disconnects the machine, and we have a little chat. I can't even remember about what, but I just realized that because she managed to distract me whilst talking to me, the baby's heart rate actually went up, and I also wasn't in as much pain because I was distracted. So I was like, okay, being distracted is gonna be my lifeline. I need that. And then pretty much as soon as she left, my baby daddy arrived with the hot water bottle. At this point, like, I was still really uncomfortable, and they can see that I'm making progress. That's what they tell me, that I'm making progress with the contractions. And so they remove the strip of tissue paper induction thingamabob from me inside. They remove it, and I still continue to have cramps, and the intensity just gets higher and higher and higher. I take the hot water bottle, and I place it on my one side, and I try to get into a comfortable position, but it just does not work. It does not work. Okay, I move, I try again, it doesn't work. I move, I try again, it doesn't work. And I'm just like shouting at my baby daddy, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's not working, it's not working. And I'm like telling him, okay, just talk to me about something and distract me from this pain. And he's like, I don't know what to talk about. And we just start talking about literally nothing, but it's just not working. Like, the pain was just escalating exponentially, and I was really struggling to manage it at that point. The pain gets so intense, and then at some point in these contractions, I give the hot water bottle back to my baby daddy, and I'm like, thanks for nothing. And yeah, my brain just goes ahead and it switches off. And from that point onwards, it was just primal urges, and I just was not in my mind. I don't know how to explain it, but I wasn't concerned about my surroundings and everything like that. I was just going through the motions with these really painful contractions. They were so painful, and they were getting longer and longer and longer. And then all of a sudden, my tummy just flipped, and I felt like I was gonna get diarrhea. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna shit the bed right now. So I jump up out of the bed, and remember, I'm not wearing pants, and I rush out to try and go to this bathroom. But then I realized that I've suddenly acquired a roommate. I don't know when, because I wasn't paying attention. I have a roommate, and my roommate has guests. So I run back into my little, I guess, cubicle that's divided by a curtain, and I get a towel to cover myself, my nether regions. Then I run out to the bathroom again, only to find that the bathroom is occupied by someone. And at that point, I'm like, no, I'm like really gonna shit myself, like in real life. And then thankfully a nurse is watching all of this happen, and she directs me to another bathroom that is in the passage, thank God. And I'm able to get into that bathroom quick enough, and I don't miss. And yeah, I had the most intense poop of all time. Like, I emptied my bowels like completely, and I actually got just a little bit of relief from the pain during that poop, thank God. And yeah, it was a great bathroom, it was a great poop session. They had this great industrial bathroom spray. I've never seen that brand before, but it was so good at just clearing up the air. And you know what, I felt so good after that poop. And I'm so glad that I had diarrhea at that point at the beginning of my labor, because then for the rest of my labor I didn't have to worry about pooping myself, which is like a real worry. So after the poop, I head back to my bed, and I still continue to have long, hard contractions. And at this point, I'm like screaming out in pain. Not screaming out in pain, but I'm like, like not too loud. But yeah, I was not able to keep quiet during the contractions. And I think I was on my bed. I was like on all fours on the bed, just holding on for dear life, having these contractions. And then there's a nurse that comes to me, and she's like, okay, you're doing so well. You are now in what is called active labor. And so now that you are in active labor, you can be graduated to the labor ward. So you should go to the labor ward now. and I was in so much pain, and I was like, I can't get up, I can't move, I can't walk. And she was like, you know what, you should try to walk to the labor ward. I was like explaining to her, you know, I can't do it. And she's like, yes, you can, you know. And she was so patient with me, thank goodness. She had this back and forth with me, and she was just explaining, like, you know, if you can walk to the labor ward, you know, the gravity is gonna help pull the baby down, and it's gonna help you make more progress. So she was like, we really advise you to just walk to the labor ward. And I was like, no, doesn't this bed have wheels? And she was like, yes, this bed does have wheels. And I was like, I can't do it, I'm having a contraction. And she was like, okay, don't you worry, like, you're having a contraction right now, but this contraction is gonna come to an end. And when this contraction comes to an end and you have a break, I want you to just catch your breath, and I want you to get up, and then you'll be able to walk to the labor ward. And she was right. The contraction finally came to an end. I was able to catch my breath, and once I caught my breath, I was like, okay, this is it. I got up. All I could hold was just the towel around my waist, and I walked straight out. I completely forgot about my phone, forgot about my baby daddy. I literally forgot everything, and just the only thing on my mind was walking to the labor ward. So I finally got to the labor ward, and then they asked me which room do I want, because there were so many different rooms, and I chose the room on the right hand side. And then as soon as I got in there, I had a huge contraction. So I rushed straight to the bed in there, and I just held on for dear life. And I had like a huge contraction. So I'm not even able to cope with the pain at this point. I don't even know what to do with myself. And then there's a new nurse in this labor ward who stays with me for the rest of my labor. And she's just trying to talk me through different positions and different breathing mechanisms. And she's just telling me to breathe through the contraction, and that I can do it and I can get through it. And she was just so helpful, and she was like, okay, let's try different positions. And so one thing that she does is she rolls an exercise ball to me. She's like, okay, you can bounce on this exercise ball during your contractions. And I did. I sat on the exercise ball. Mind you, I've got no pants on, but thankfully she put a linen saver over the exercise ball. And I was just, you know, sitting on this exercise ball whilst leaning on the bed with my arms. And you know what, it felt amazing. It was an effective contraction, I'll say that. The position was perfect, but because I was so big, my balance was just off. I had to just spend the entire time on the exercise ball concentrating on not falling over, and I couldn't really just enjoy the relief that it was bringing me, because I was so anxious about falling over because I couldn't balance properly on the exercise ball. I mean, if I had an exercise ball of my own throughout my pregnancy, I might have been more familiar with it and enjoyed that more at that time. But at that point, because it was my first time using the exercise ball pregnant, it just felt wrong. It felt wrong. It felt like I was gonna fall, felt like I was gonna hurt myself. And I just thought, you know what, this is not the time to introduce something new. So after 3 really good contractions, I decided to get off the exercise ball. And then the next thing that I wanted to do was just to get on the floor. And I'm telling you, the floor, it felt so good. The floor felt so good. I was on all fours on the floor, and I was having my contraction, and I was feeling so grounded because the floor is just so sturdy. And then there was just the nurse, and she was just like, oh no, sorry, you're not allowed to be on the floor, because if the baby just falls out of you, you know, it's gonna get hurt because the floor is so hard. So I'm sorry, you're gonna have to get off the floor. I was so annoyed, but I got up. As soon as she told me that, I got up, and then I got onto the bed. And then at that point, I was just on all fours on the bed for like quite a few contractions. And yeah, because the bed was angled up, I was able to hold on to the top. and just kneel and just like, yeah, just hold on for dear life through these contractions. There's literally no other way to describe it. At that point, you know, she was like, okay, she could see how close my contractions were together, and she was like, you know, don't worry, this is all a good sign. And then she told me that she is going to do an internal exam, and that she needs me to be on my back for this internal exam. So I get on my back. She puts in a gloved hand in, and you know what, I wasn't even like fully like concentrating on what she was doing, because I was still having contractions while she was doing this internal exam, which was really painful. And it just seemed like she was in there forever. Her hand was just, she was just not done. I don't know what she was checking for, but she was just in there forever. And then before I knew it, my water broke. And then after that, she took her hand out, and yeah, I just remember just a warm rush of water. It just felt like somebody just took water from the bath and just poured it out of me. It was just really warm. But I don't even remember looking at this water, because I mean, I was just so concentrated on the contractions. I didn't even see what my waters looked like. But yeah, before I knew it, she was removing the linen saver that was under me when my waters broke and replacing it with a new clean dry one. At that point, the nurse then explained to me that because my waters have broken, I have to be monitored now the whole time, and I can't really move around as much as I was anymore. I had to stay on my back, and they were going to need to monitor the baby. So she brought the machine and they put the seat belts on me, and I was sitting on my back, and basically that was me for the rest of my labor. We're monitoring the baby was doing well, and the contractions were just hitting me long and hard still. At this point, the nurse does tell me, you know, that there are different options for pain relief and that I shouldn't worry, she's got my back. And I was like, okay, I definitely need something for pain. And she tells me, okay, there's gas, there's an injection, you know. And I was like, okay, you know, I'll take the gas. And she's like, yeah, let's try out the gas. So she gives me something that just looks like a hookah pipe, basically, but it's a lot bigger than a normal hookah pipe. I think the mouthpiece was like ginormous compared to a hookah pipe. And she's like, okay, when you have a contraction, you should just pull in, and it's gonna relieve the pain. And you know, there's something written on this hookah pipe, and I can see it's like N2O2. I think it's nitrogen oxide. I mean, for the first few contractions, it doesn't really work for me. I try to pull, it's not doing the things. I can still feel the pain. What's going on? And she just keeps coaching me, and she's like, no, you really need to pull. And so I inhale harder and harder and harder, until finally I inhale so hard that you can hear the gas leaving the tank. And that is when finally I got some pain relief. And she's like, okay, so now that's just what you've got to do. Every contraction, you've just got to pull. And all you could hear was just gas just leaving this tank. It just made this weird grinding sound. It was like every single time I had a contraction. And you know what? It was working really well at that point. So every contraction that I had, as soon as I felt it coming, and I was able to do that and just breathe in this nitrogen oxide until I get to the end of the contraction, and then I was okay, and I felt like I didn't experience any pain. And I was like, okay, you know, this is amazing, this is great. And then after quite a few contractions with this gas to relieve the pain, I just felt like I had lost all my energy, and I was just feeling so weak. And I could tell that it was this gas that's just making me feel so tired, but I didn't have any other thing that I could do because I needed the pain relief. So I kept pulling and I kept pulling, and then I also just remember also feeling very thirsty. My throat was so dry. So my baby daddy, because he couldn't just hand me the water because I was feeling so weak, he had to literally squirt the water into my mouth so that I could just swallow some water. And then I also needed a snack, and he was just like squirting tiny bits of a protein shake into my mouth so that I can just like keep having these contractions. And it was just really, really intense, and I hated how it made me feel at some points because I kept pulling, and I went from being weak to actually just being nauseous. But I was putting up with even the nauseousness because I was like, I need this pain relief. But then the pain and the contractions were just getting longer and harder. And it started to get to the point where I was having contractions back to back, which means I was breathing in this gas back to back. And this gas, I think it's the oxygen, it was freezing cold. And I'm telling you right now, it's 10 weeks later, I still have PTSD from how cold that gas was. If I have a cold day and I step outside, I just remember the trauma of having to inhale that gas. It was just horrible. There's nothing nice about it. I was having back-to-back contractions, and they were getting more and more intense. So I'm feeling weak, I'm feeling tired, my throat is dry, the air is cold, I'm feeling nauseous, and now the contractions are getting so strong that the gas is no longer helping me anymore. And that is just, I felt so helpless at that point. And I was just like telling the nurse, I was like, no, I'm still feeling pain, like just begging for help. And I just remembered something that my mom said to me about her induction, is that you need an epidural because the contractions that you get from an induction are unnatural. And an epidural is the best thing that's going to help you. So at that point, I started asking for an epidural. I started telling my nurse, I need an epidural. And she's like, don't worry, you're okay, just keep pulling the gas. And I was like really annoyed at that point because I was like, I need an epidural. And it just seemed like she was just like not concerned, and she was like not worried about getting me this epidural. Thankfully, I had my baby daddy in the room with me, and so I was telling him as well that I need an epidural. And I mean, I'd have a few contractions and I keep telling the nurse, I need an epidural, and it just seemed that nothing was being done about it. So at that point, my gynae came into the labor ward to check on me and see how my progress was. And with the little strength that I had, I just told my gynae, I need an epidural. That was the only thing that I needed to tell him, is that I need an epidural. I'm in too much pain. I'm not coping. I need an epidural. And he was like, okay, you don't want to do that, but he heard me. And yeah, he also had a very relaxed, nonchalant attitude towards this epidural that I urgently and desperately needed. And after my gynae left, so much time lapsed, and I was still trying to get pain relief from this gas, and there was still no epidural. So I looked my baby daddy dead in the eyes, and I was like, look now, I've asked the nurse for an epidural, I've asked the gynae for an epidural, and I still don't have this epidural, and it has been more than 30 minutes. I was watching the clock, it had been more than 40 minutes, and I was like, baby, you need to do something about this. And he was like, okay. He got up, I don't know what he did. I don't know who he spoke to, but all I know is that when he came back with the guy, the anesthesiologist, that was going to give me the epidural. Thank God. At this point, the nurse explains to me that I have to stop using the gas because we don't want the pain meds to overlap, because each of the pain meds puts like pressure on the baby, like, you know, it's hard on the baby, so the baby shouldn't have more than one pain relief method that it's exposed to at a time. So I have to stop taking the gas and go rogue, and whilst going rogue, that is when I receive my epidural, and that was insane. As much as the gas was not covering all the pain, I didn't realize just how much work it was doing, because once I sobered up from that gas, the contractions were so intense I could not sit still through them. And then guess what you need to do in order to get an epidural? You need to sit still so that the doctor can stick a needle through your back. And that was impossible. You've got to sit on the edge of the bed and you've got to like look down, and you've got to just turn your back into a C and arch your back as much as possible so that the doctor can have access to your spine. And I'm telling you right now, that was freaking impossible. It was impossible. You couldn't have asked me to do a more impossible thing at that time. So I was having these intense contractions. I couldn't sit still. And I mean, you need to sit still because the doctor needs to get it right in your spine and he can't mess it up. Otherwise, I'm sure you're going to be paralyzed. So it's really important to sit still, but the pain was so intense. Like I was like screaming out in pain. Like I was not coping. And yeah, I just couldn't sit still. And thankfully the nurse helped me. What she did was she held me in position. She held me, she pulled my head down, and she held me, and you know, she told me to just try and breathe through these contractions, and they were so intense. I was like shaking. It was impossible. But thankfully this doctor was trained to do the impossible, and he managed to get me that epidural into my spine whilst I was having contractions. That was so hard. It was so hard, but yeah, he inserted the epidural, and then I sat back and just slowly but surely I got some pain relief. And the quiet and the calm that came over me once I finally got that pain relief.
Peace and quiet.
It was beautiful. It was beautiful. My mind quietened down. Like I actually could finally breathe and I could just take a breath, and I even felt my strength returning a little bit. Finally, after so many hours of hell, I was finally in a good mood at that point. So, I mean, I forgot to mention that at this point, you know, I was progressing really fast with all these contractions and all the contractions being back to back. Every time the nurse was checking me, I had increased by another 2 centimeters and another 2 centimeters. So I actually got my epidural when I was 8 centimeters. And I guess that's why the nurse and the doctor were trying to discourage me from getting an epidural, because I was making so much progress. They felt that possibly my labor would be over soon, but I just couldn't take it anymore. I felt like the pain was ruining my birth experience, and I didn't want to look back at me giving birth as a horrible time where I was just in so much pain that I felt like I was going crazy and I hated everyone that was around me. No, I wanted my birth to be something that was beautiful and enjoyable, and something that I could look back at and be happy to remember. So the epidural did that for me, and I was so happy that I asked for it, and I was even happier that I got it. So I was really relaxed, and I even was able to start using my phone and text everybody and tell them, you know, how my labor's going and all of that good fun stuff. Pretty much my labor just came to a halt. It came to a halt and I stopped making progress for quite a bit, until eventually I started to feel some pressure. And the nurse was like, okay, this is a good sign, you know, this is a great sign that, you know, you are going to be pushing soon. So with the epidural, because I couldn't feel anything, the nurse just told me that, okay, when you need to push, you need to be able to feel the pressure. So she's going to lower the epidural so that I can at least feel the pressure and it can help me push. So I agreed to that, and I started to get just really intense pressure, and I could also feel a lot of pain in my tummy, like it would harden and I would be in pain. And she was like, okay, that's great, those are the contractions that we need. And so they start getting ready for me to start pushing, you know, and that's when I just expressed to the nurse, and I'm like, you know what, I don't want an episiotomy, I don't want to rip either. I'm hoping that I can just push the baby out slowly so that I don't get hurt. And then she was like to me, oh, you don't get to choose. And I really didn't appreciate being told that I don't get to choose when it is my vagina. So yeah, I didn't really fight back at that point because I was in the throes of labor and I didn't have it in me to chat back. And before I knew it, my gynae had come back into the room, and it was going to be time to push. He was also agreeing and announcing that it's going to be time to push soon. So my baby daddy, who actually works in a hospital, then got to dress my gynecologist for the birth, which was really, really special. He put on like a blue apron on him, and then everybody was just ready to catch this baby. Even the bed, they moved the bed around, put my legs in stirrups. The stirrups were like attached to the bed some way, somehow, and then my gynae had me scooch to the edge of the bed, so that he could see everything that was happening. But all of this moving around was quite crazy because I couldn't really feel much in my legs because of the epidural. So the nurse had to help me move around a lot, but she was very, very helpful. And then when I was finally in position, they were like giving me instructions on how to push effectively. So you know the whole story, they count you down, they tell you to hold your breath and push as hard as possible. And I push and I push and I push, and you know, I only pushed for about 7.5 minutes. It was really, really fast. And I do remember my gynecologist supporting my perineum, which is great. But unfortunately, I still ripped in the end. I find out that after the baby comes out. But yeah, my gynecologist supports my perineum. I push and push and push. And it's actually really easy, even though I can't feel much. And before I know it, the baby is out. So they hold the baby with a blue cloth and they put him right on my chest. And it's just me and the baby for the first time, which was really, really special. And yeah, the baby came out, he started crying almost right away. And I just remember he was just so warm. He felt so warm on my chest, and his skin was so smooth, and also he smelt so nice. He smelled so nice, and I was just so in love. Like, those first few minutes of me falling in love with my baby were everything. And I was just speaking to him, and he was trying to open his eyes, and he was trying to look at me, and it was just a beautiful moment. And everyone in the room was so happy and saying yay and congratulations. And that was a beautiful moment, and I couldn't believe it. My baby was here. Whilst I'm holding the baby, they hand my baby daddy a pair of scissors, and he gets to cut the cord, which is really special, and the nurse gets to take pictures of him doing that. And then next after that, I think that we did try to get the baby to latch. I can't really remember the order of everything. We did try to get the baby to latch on my boob, and he latched perfectly. And he was going at the boob for like a decent bit, and I was so surprised that I had anything coming out of my nipples at all. But yeah, I had the colostrum that they tell you about. I had colostrum, and I was so happy that he was getting something, but he wasn't really that hungry. And the nurse did explain that because I was eating throughout my labor, it's possible that he wasn't really that hungry, but at least, you know, he managed to latch. Then they took him and they started weighing him and checking this and that. And then they rubbed him dry on a towel, and then they wrapped him in a blanket. And they wrapped him in such a way that they made a hat out of it, and they just, you know, swaddled him. And then it was time for my baby daddy to hold the baby. So he was sitting down, and he got to hold the baby for the first time, which was so special. It was just a really beautiful experience at that point. And then we got to take more pictures. Then he took pictures of the baby and I. Like, it was just perfect. Oh, sorry, Papa. Sorry. Hey, I'm talking about you. So after we have our first few beautiful moments, you know, my baby daddy also takes pictures with the birth team. And then I ask, like, oh my gosh, what about the placenta? And my gynae's like, your placenta came out ages ago. And that was so crazy. I didn't even feel it coming out. And I asked my baby daddy to take a picture of the placenta, and you know what? It did not look appetizing at all. There was nothing about that placenta that made me want to take it home, cut it up into tiny pieces and eat it. No, thank you. The birth is done. They clear the room of all this like equipment and whatever, and then they put the baby in a little bed that has wheels on it. And then the nurse was like, okay, it's time for you to take a shower. So the nurse helps me stand up for the first time since giving birth, which was, yeah, a slow process. She got me to stand up, and she helped me walk to the shower, and she just talked me through the shower, and she was like, okay, you know, there's going to be a lot of blood, you know, I know you're feeling a little bit shaky and weak, you know. She was just telling me how to manage. And yeah, I got to just wash everything off. I think my baby daddy brought my toiletries from the room, and then he also brought me some pajamas. And then I remember the nurse asking me, like, don't you have darker pajamas? And I was like, no, like all my pajamas are like light colors, and my pajamas were light gray, and it was just not ideal because there was so much blood. And then I remember that there was a Dr. White pack of maternity pads, and the nurse took one of them, and she was like, okay, here's a maternity pad. And this was the first time that I've seen a maternity pad. Mind you, this pad has no wings. It also has no adhesive. And I'm just looking at it, and I'm like, what the hell, how is this pad gonna work? And then she's like, okay, you just wedge it between your legs, and because it's so big, it's not gonna fall. And she was right. I just wedged it there and it was there. It just stayed there, and I got dressed slowly, and then I was done. And then it was time to leave the labor ward with my baby. And so yeah, after that I left the labor ward with my baby daddy and the baby, and we all went back to my room at the hospital, and that was it. I was a mom, and that was the end of me giving birth to my beautiful baby boy. All in all, I would say that it was a really beautiful experience. From the start of my induction to when I pushed the baby out was probably about 7.5 hours. Then I pushed for only 7.5 minutes. So it really wasn't that long, thankfully. And yeah, I had what I would say was an easy delivery. Looking back at my labor, I don't really know if there's much that I would criticize, because I don't think you can have a perfect labor experience. But I think that it was a good balance, and that because everything went well and I got my beautiful baby boy at the end, it was just worth it. I can't even come up with anything to say that I did not appreciate. Yeah, it's unfortunate that I ripped. I did rip. I got 2 stitches, and that is something that I really didn't want to get. But I didn't have a choice. I wish that I was coached to push differently. But listening back to the recording that I had, once the baby's head was about to come out, his blood pressure did drop. So I think it was urgent for me to push really hard and get him out as soon as possible. There was also the whole thing of, if you don't push hard enough, the head can actually go back, and you'll have to work like twice as hard to get the head out. So there's also that. So I don't really know what could have been done differently to stop me from ripping, especially because my gynecologist did support my perineum. So he did everything that he could, I guess, to stop me from ripping, but I still ended up ripping in the end. But I think 2 stitches is what they call a 1st-degree tear. So it wasn't that bad. It's healed. I mean, I'm 10 weeks postpartum, and yeah, I'm okay now. The stitches don't really hurt that much anymore. And I'm also so grateful that my baby daddy was at my side from start to finish, as much as he could, as much as the hospital allowed him to be. And I'm also so grateful for all the advice that my mom gave me, which helped me get the epidural on time, and helped me enjoy the rest of my labor. So yeah, thank you for watching this video. Please give this video a thumbs up. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure to watch my next video where I will be talking more about my hospital stay. But yeah, I'm so tired. Being a new mom is not easy, but yeah, thank you, little Langa, for being with me in this video and sleeping like a perfect little angel. So yeah, that's it from us, you guys. Mwah!